Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the end of the Spider-Verse storyline as we take a look at Spider-Man Volume 4, Number 5. So, last time on End of the Spider-Verse! Put simply, things are going to hell. After Peter was erased from existence thanks to the totem knife that the wasp converted Spider-Gwen wound up stabbing him with, well, essentially Aranya and Night Spider kind of had to ditch the Temple of Neth in order to to get away from Shathra's horde of wasp Spidey totems. Sorry, digesting lunch. However, before they left, Aranya was able to try and memorize this ancient story that was being told on the walls of the temple, and so they at least didn't leave empty-handed. In the meantime, back with other Spidey, specifically Miles Morales and Hunter Spider, their mission to invade Loom World kind of didn't go well either. As while Miles and Hunter Spider were spying on Shathra, they heard Shathra bragging about how they took out Peter, and Miles, in anger, wound up jumping at her and tried to hit her with the biggest venom blast he got, resulting in Hunter Spider abandoning him because, well, Miles kind of dug his own hole here, and unfortunately the venom blast did nothing to Shathra, who quickly had Miles locked away because despite him now being a wasp totem, he wasn't under her control, so she wanted to know what the hell that was, and so Miles was locked away with other spider totems that Shathra has not gained control over, specifically Spinneret, the Spider-Mobile, Silly Spider, an 8-bit Spider-Man, and the MC2 Peter Parker, who was revived as the other, who is in that dungeon as the giant spider monster. So yeah, things aren't looking good on his part. Not made worse by the fact that another Spidey in the multiverse, specifically Spider-Norman, kind of blew himself up to try and stick it to Shathra, as he took his last strand of the Web of Life and Destiny and wound up sending it somewhere in the multiverse that would ensure it would stop Shathra, and to make sure Shathra wouldn't be able to convert him and get the secrets to his plan, he killed himself to stop her, which unfortunately was not good for Madam Web's plan because he was kind of an essential Spidey. However, Madam Web and Spider UK do at least try and stack the odds a little bit more in their favor, as Aranya, and Night Spider managed to meet up with the other team of Spideys who are in Earth 616, the one that went with Morlun to, get the totem dagger. And after they knocked out Spinstress, who was making fun of them, they revealed that they do have another Spidey that they've recruited, specifically the Spider-Man of Earth 616 Beta, Peter Palmer, the Amazing Spider-Man, with no hyphen between Spider and Man. As such, while things are looking a little bit more up, people are still a little worried. However, last issue ended as we saw a direct consequence of Spider-Man being erased by the Totem Dagger. As we cut to the Oscorp of the main Marvel Universe, and we see that as they're experimenting with our own teleportation pod, the strand of the Web of Life and Destiny that Spider-Norman had appears in the lab, and the scientist that finds it is Peter Parker. So, what's the story there? Well, that's what today's issue is about. This entire issue is essentially kind of like a detour issue. From now, we're taking a break from the main plot of End of the Spider-Verse because, well, you got to remember the thing about the totem knife. When a spider totem is stabbed with it, it doesn't erase the person from existence. It severs them from the Web of Life and Destiny, and it doesn't just take away their spider powers. No, it makes it so that they were never a part of the web in the first place. It completely rewrites their life so that the events that would have led them to becoming their world's respective spider totems never happened. In the case of Jessica Drew, that one was kind of a more intimate relationship because the thing is, Jessica Drew's spider powers were tied to, well, her being born in the first place, as, depending on which origin you go with, either she got the spider powers as a direct consequence of a medicine to cure a sickness, or she got her spider powers when blasted in the womb by a laser. So either way, the spider powers were kind of tied to her being born at all. But in the case of Peter, well, his spider powers were just given to him by happenstance. He only got them because he was standing at the right place at the right time when a radioactive spider came down and bit his arm and bit his hand. But what if the spider missed? What if it didn't get there? And so we see that story as after Peter is stabbed, the comic cuts back and shows what Peter's new life is like, having never gotten his spider powers. As on the day that he attended the on the day he attended this science expo where he would have been bitten by the radioactive spider, well, the light from the radiation experiment kind of was a little too bright for him, and so he shielded it with his hands, and as a result, the spider that would have bitten him missed him and just landed on the floor. However, someone still did get bit at that expo because, well, only Peter was stabbed with the totem knife. And so, as a result, the spider crawls along the floor, and like in the main universe, the spider ends up biting Cindy Moon's foot, resulting in her still getting her spider powers. But in the meantime, back with Peter, well, bereft of spider powers, his life kind of goes the way it did before. He's still the social outcast. He's still a nerd that everyone picks on and bullies and makes fun of. And Peter still has thoughts of vengeance against them because, well, you try being bullied most of your life and try and keep a happy demeanor. But ultimately, Peter was still able to keep a somewhat positive attitude because, like in the main universe, he still had the love of Aunt May and Uncle Ben there for him. However, there are still direct consequences of Peter not being Spider-Man. For starters, well, there immediately are reports in the news of a mysterious Spider-Woman that's swinging around New York. No one can get a positive ID on her, but people have reported seeing her, and when the news interviews J. Jonah Jameson about it, whose paper is the only one in New York has not been reporting on her, he just thinks that she's a hoax. She doesn't exist. There's no such person as a lady who can stick to walls and shoot webs out of her hands. That's just stupid. But either way, it's clear that someone's going around New York doing the spider business instead of Peter. But, well, Peter doesn't get a chance to figure out who that is, because one night, while Peter is at home with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, well, they get broken into, because the thing is, well, this was going to happen either way, because, well, the mugger that would have killed Uncle Ben breaks in that night and holds the Parker family at gunpoint. Of course, the Parker family pleads for their lives, telling him he can take whatever he wants if he just lets them be. And the guy is clearly panicking as he's just telling everyone to stay where they are. As he starts pointing his gun at everyone, Peter tries offering a new telescope that Aunt May and Uncle Ben got him and says, "You can sell it. It's like worth a few $100. And when he points his gun at Peter, Aunt May immediately starts talking down to the guy, saying to take his gun away from her nephew. At which point he points it at her, and Peter, seeing the clearly irrational guy pointing a gun at his aunt, ends up kind of freaking out himself as he jumps at the guy to try and get it out of his hands. And the end result? Peter gets shot. Ultimately, and when May and Ben see this, Ben immediately goes on the offensive as he rushes at the guy and decks him in the face, knocking him out. But the damage is done. The nugger may be knocked out, but Peter still has a bullet wound, and it's clear he's not doing well. As such, May and Ben call an ambulance, and Peter is rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, his life is saved. The bullet thankfully didn't do any major damage to most of him, so he'll still live another day. But sadly, despite the doctor's best efforts, there was one body part they couldn't exactly bring back: Peter's leg. And so they tell May and Ben that Peter may never walk again. Though Peter and May are dubious about this because Peter's, well, a Parker, and Parkers are stubborn. And sure enough, Peter does end up going to physical therapy, and he is able to walk again, albeit with a cane. As such, once Peter is deemed suitable enough to re-enter society, he goes back to school, and, well, at first it seems like it's going to be a repeat of what it was before, as immediately one jackass kid named Jason? I think his name is Jason. Let me look and see, because Peter did call him by name. His name is Jason Iannello, but either way, yeah, Jason trips him up, and when Peter immediately gives him some snark, he gets ready to beat the shit out of Peter, until someone comes to Peter's rescue and knocks Jason aside, even helping Peter up. And Peter goes to thank him. He finds that it's Flash Thompson, which surprises Peter, but pretty much Flash is just kind of impressed with what Peter did, because, like, Peter had the guts to stand up to a robber who was threatening his aunt and uncle, and as a result, Flash is just like, you know what, I was wrong about you. You've got guts, and I think you are really cool. And as such, Flash actually encourages everyone in the school to cheer for Peter, and as a result, Peter's popularity skyrockets. Flash ends up getting him to hang out with all the cool kids, and Peter actually starts making friends with them. They start inviting Peter out to get-togethers, and while Peter can't talk anyone into going to, like, science expos or whatever, they are able to get Peter to go out and have a social life. It's even clear from a little bit of flirting that Peter and Liz Allen are starting to have a thing between them. And so, yeah, Peter's social life immediately skyrockets. Flash is still Flash, and at this point in time, he hadn't undergone his character development, said he wasn't a complete and utter douche nozzle. So while he and Peter are buds, he still kind of wants to, take advantage of said friendship to, get the big brain kid to help him cheat on his tests or whatever. And as a result, while Peter's not okay with this, he does at least agree to tutor Flash so, he can at least learn the answers on his own, which Flash reluctantly does agree to. However, as Peter and Flash are sitting in class and discussing this, well, immediately things get kind of break down as a supervillain breaks in, specifically the Sandman, which is something that happened in early Spider-Man. At one point in the comics, they were all trying to hide from the cops. The Sandman broke into Midtown High and did try holding a classroom of teenagers hostage. In the meantime, though, as the principal thankfully was there at the time when this was going down, so he immediately tells the Sandman to, tells the Sandman to piss off with the intent of giving the children enough time to escape. But Peter kind of freezes up at this moment, as when he sees the Sandman, he gets a bit of PTSD, as when he looks at the Sandman, he sees the robber that broke into his home. However, that PTSD doesn't last long because someone comes in and kicks Sandman's ass, and that someone is Cindy Moon, aka Silk. Yep, like I kind of heavily implied before, Silk is now the residing spider person in this world, and because Peter has been going around kicking ass, she's been the one doing all the Spidey business in this reality, and it's essentially just the same stuff that Peter did, as she fights the same supervillains, deals with them in similar manners, and while some are a little harder than others because she doesn't have Peter's smarts, she is still very adept at what she does, and still can kick ass with the best of them. As such, Peter is actually amazed when he sees Silk, and he's able to get a good enough look at her that he can tell that she's around their age. And as such, while Peter and the rest of the kids end up running out of class, Peter's just praising her to hell and back, saying how cool she was. And it's amazing that someone like them could, actually be going around kicking ass. Though, of course, J. Jonah Jameson immediately arrives on the scene, and like with Peter before her, he immediately starts bad-mouthing Silk to everybody, stating that she's a menace, that she's clearly a foreign menace, because, yeah, people can tell she's a Korean American, and so he says that she clearly sabotaged my son's rocket, she's a menace, and blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's just J. Jonah Jameson being an asshole like usual, but as in the middle of this posturing, that's when Silk arrives on the scene, having beaten the Sandman and trapped him in a vacuum container. As such, she swings away, and as Peter says, "Thank you, Spider-Woman," she says that you're welcome, before saying, "Oh, by the way, my name's not Spider-Woman, it's Silk." And as such, people now know that Silk is the premier superhero, and Peter just becomes her biggest fan. At one point, we even cut to a later day as we see Peter and Flash in the middle of a tutoring session, and Peter's just gushing about Silk to hell and back, with even Flash kind of having to pull him back down to earth, because, hey, they're supposed to be studying, though it's clear that Peter has more than a big crush on Silk. I say crush in air quotes because even Peter admits that it's nothing romantic, and like I said, he's dating Liz Allen now. But he at least admires Silk enough that he has a scrapbook for her, when Flash sees this, he says maybe he should have a Silk fan club for her, which Peter thinks is not a bad idea considering all the crap that Jameson throws her way, since again, Jameson ain't a big fan of spider people. But ultimately, Flash is able to talk Peter away from this because, hey, he's Peter Parker. He's probably one of the smartest guys that Flash knows. He could do better than just make a fan club for Silk, and Peter actually starts agreeing. And so one night he decides to stay in at home as he starts tinkering a little, and sure enough, Peter begins making Silk gadgets, various bits of doodads and stuff that he himself created in the main timeline. He creates web shooters for her, which even Silk admits are not necessary since she can make her own webs, spider trackers, a little vibrational thing that she can use against the Vulture, and of course a Silk signal, which Peter once had when in the early days of Spider-Man, so kind of funny that Silk will have one too. But either way, once he builds this stuff, it becomes a matter of trying to track Silk down. Thankfully, Peter pays attention to enough of Silk's activities to at least figure out that she's a Korean American, and that she may be living somewhere nearby. As such, he creates something that'll be able to communicate with her spider sense, and he calls her to the Midtown High rooftop, which Silk is a little surprised by, but she complies, because if someone was able to tap into her spider sense, then maybe it's a good idea to meet with whoever this is, at least if it's, especially since this might be a trap. Hold on one second. Sorry about that dog stuff. But yeah, eventually Silk does end up meeting with Peter on the Midtown High's roof, and she's initially surprised that the guy who called her out was just a high school kid. But either way, Peter presents her with all the tech that she made and offers to, give it to her, be her guy in the chair and all that stuff. And while Silk is initially surprised by all this, she asks Peter why the heck he wants to help her. After all, they don't know each other. At which point Peter tells her about how she saved his life, and how she saved his and his classmates' life with the Sandman, and he kind of wants to repay her. But again, she still kind of calls suspect to this because, well, she saved a bunch of people's lives, and none of them have ever wanted to repay her like this. But Peter kind of starts countering this and saying, well, why do you want to help other people? What do you get out of it? At which point, Silk starts going over her story in this new timeline, and put simply, like in the original timeline, she and her family were approached by Ezekiel Sims shortly after Cindy got her spider powers, and basically they were given the offer of hiding out in Sims' bunker so that they could hide from the inheritors. However, while Cindy did initially want to accept this offer, well, that's when the crazy shit began happening, because, well, she began noticing all these weird things going on around the city, namely stuff that was going on in the early days of Spider-Man's career, like the Tinkerer and his little fix-it shop that he was using to spy on government officials, Dr. Octopus and on his accident, the Vulture, John Jameson's rocket blowing up, and so on and so forth. Basically, she started seeing all these weird things, and Silk just had a weird innate feeling that if nothing was done about these things, then people would get hurt. And the thing is, Silk, with Cindy realizing she had the power she did, she realized that she could do something. And the thought of just sitting back and doing nothing while all these bad things happened, it didn't sit right with her. And so she decided that she was actually going to try and help others, which resulted in her adopting the Silk identity in this new timeline. And so, yeah, that's how she became this new timeline's resident Premier Spidey. But in the case of Peter, she begins asking him what he gets out of this. She once again asks him what he gets out of this, why he wants to help her, and well, Peter tells Silk that he knows what it's like to be kind of on the other end of bullying, as well, like in the main timeline with Jonah and Spidey. The Daily Bugle has kind of been raking Silk over the irons, and Peter doesn't really like that, and so he just thinks that Silk could use any help that she can get, and Peter wants to give her all the support that he can. And Silk, kind of touched by this, decides to take Peter up on his offer, and she officially appoints him as her IT guy. And sure enough, Peter does continue providing Silk with all of his tech, which does end up helping her in her future battles against supervillains. She's able to use a disruptor against the Vulture to short out his wings. She's able to use the Silk signal to mess with Mysterio, and even during a battle with Kraven, she even managed to hit him with a spider tracer so she can track him down and kick his ass something fierce. In the meantime, Peter continues excelling in school as he still has a good friend group and a healthy social life, and even with all Silk's exploits, her popularity begins growing, especially since, like, in the main Marvel universe, she sells pictures of herself to the Daily Bugle, and as such, little by little, things are actually going well for both Silk and Peter. So much so that, and the thing is, Peter didn't just keep all this technology to himself. He began repurposing it for his own stuff, and he even presented it in a school science fair in which he won first prize, impressing the judges so much that one of his teachers even said, "I have someone I might want to introduce you to later," because he thinks that Peter might be going places. And sure enough, the comic then even cuts ahead to Midtown High graduation, and Peter is graduating as valedictorian, all with his new friends surrounding him, being happy for him, saying he earned it, and as Peter and his May and Ben come up and tell Peter that they're happy for his accomplishments and wish that his parents were there, they immediately Flash comes in and starts giving Peter a friendly noogie, saying that he'll take care of Peter when they're at Empire U. So basically, Peter's just doing even better. And the thing is, the reason why Peter and Flash are both going to Empire U is because they both got scholarships. Flash got a football scholarship, and Peter actually won a scholarship from Oscorp. And Norman Osborn actually personally meets with Peter on his graduation day, stating that he wants to keep his eye on him because he sees potential in him. And when he's done with college, Norman might want to talk to him about a job. And sure enough, we then cut to the present day as we see Peter Parker as he is a loyal employee of Oscorp, and he's even named the Employee of the Month. Pretty much, Peter's just doing well for himself, and it's about. So yeah, everything just seems to be going well. As over the years, Peter has still been Silk's tech guy and been helping her out whenever he could. And even in this altered timeline, well, like I said, Silk's a mere spider hero. Even going back to that whole truck heist that we saw in the first issue, in this new timeline, it was Silk that stopped Oscorp from losing her junk, with Peter calling in the favor instead of Norman calling Peter. And so ultimately, that's how everything was stopped. Ultimately, that's how the hijackers were stopped, though Norman still had to go jump through a few legal hoops to get his stuff back. In the meantime, but it's at this point when things kind of start catching up back with the end of the Spider-Verse storyline, as Peter gets that transport up and running, and it activates, resulting in the strand of the Web of Life and Destiny that Spider-Norman sent out arriving in the main Marvel Universe. Only in this issue, we see that the web also has a few extra passengers, as we see that Spider-Man, despite being burnt up in the last issue, managed to find a way to still survive. As we see a team of spiders inside the capsule containing the strand of the Web of Life and Destiny, and they're spelling out the word help, which immediately alerts Peter, yeah, I might want to call Silk on this, and thus that's where the issue ends. So, my thoughts on it? Well, as part of the overall story for End of the Spider-Verse, this one kind of feels like it drags a little. Because unlike the other issues where we've been seeing a continuous story, at least throughout, this one really feels like it's detached from the main story. Now, it all does come back together in the end, because ultimately, Peter does continue being an active force after this issue in this new role, but the whole issue itself really doesn't feel like it's all part of the whole grand design of End of the Spider-Verse. But with that said, it's actually a really good story. I like it. Here's the thing. Like I said, I'm always a sucker for alternate universe and alternate timeline stories. And the thing is, this story is very much intriguing because, well, the thing is, when Spider-Man got stabbed earlier in the storyline, it was a sense of shock and horror as we saw him fading away, worrying about what the heck's going to happen to him, what's going to happen to his life, what's going to happen to all the people he saved. And the thing is, when it comes down to when we have a hero's life rewritten so that they never become a superhero, it usually kind of results in a worst case scenario. Usually something happens that ensures that they either were killed or things just got worse because there was no superhero around to save everyone, and ultimately it just kind of leads to a very dour ending that just kind of tells us we need to get this hero back and put history back to the way it was. But instead, we are actually shown a very interesting alternate timeline for the main Marvel Universe, as for the most part the world is still the same. The heroes that still premiered still rose up in this world and still took on their titular roles. Thor still became Thor, Iron Man still became Iron Man, the Avengers still became the Avengers, and so on and so forth. But in place of Spider-Man was Silk. Because with the knowledge that Cindy Moon was also at that science expo and was also bitten by the spider that gave Peter his powers, then it allows her to kind of step into the role. And what I like with having Silk become the premier spider person in this new timeline is her thought process when she decides to take up the Silk mantle. In the main timeline, she took up the In the main timeline, I don't really know the full details of why Cindy Moon became Silk. Most likely it was because she wanted to get back out into the world and she wanted to try and do some good with her spider powers. Again, I didn't read a Ramirez storyline, so I don't know. But at the very least, it's clear that she did have a good heart and she wanted to get back out into the world, and so she decided to use her powers to the best of their abilities, especially with Peter there acting as kind of a guiding hand, with him being the Amazing Spider-Man and helping out New York. But I like her origin in this issue. Basically, while So basically, like her original timeline counterpart, Cindy was presented with the opportunity to run and hide as Ezekiel Sims approached her and said, "Hey, these guys are gonna come hunt for you because you're this special spider totem. So it's probably best that you duck and hide to avoid danger because these guys mean serious business." But with that said, Cindy began to realize that things were not right in the world. She started seeing all the baddies that Peter would have fought if he had become Spider-Man, and ultimately, whether it be some kind of cosmic awareness or just her conscience kicking in, she started realizing if no one does anything about these things, it's going to lead to a lot of bad shit. That's going to lead to a lot of people getting hurt. And the thing is, she had the power to do it. She had the power to fight back, and she realized, I can't just sit back and do nothing. If I did, I would feel guilty, and I don't want to end up hurting these people, and I don't want to end up and I don't want to have that on my conscience. I want to actually do something, and I want to make a difference. And so she decided to become, and so that resulted in her becoming Silk in this timeline. And because she made that decision like she did, she went on to face all the threats that Spider-Man would have faced. It was her that duked it out with the Chameleon. It was her that duked it out with Doc Ock. It was her that duked it out with the Sandman. It was her that did all of the shit that Peter would have done had he been bitten by that spider. And so as a result, she's the one that starts setting up a name for herself. And as a result, it only gives us kind of a breath of relief because we know that the threats that Peter is facing are still being dealt with, but also shows Silk being a genuine badass. I love her thought process for why she wants to be a superhero. As it's not a single tragedy that puts her in the limelight. It's just her seeing bad shit happening and deciding, I can't just sit back and do nothing. I like that. It's sweet. And what makes it better is that rather than Peter being relegated to just a helpless bystander now, he's still getting in on the action, as despite Uncle Ben not dying in this timeline, that night still had a major impact on Peter. As in this timeline, because Peter was there when the mugger hit, Peter was able to save his Uncle Ben's life. And yes, Peter wound up getting hospitalized because he got shot instead, but he survived. He got better. And yes, he now walks with a cane. And yeah, now he now walks with a limp and has to walk around and has to use a brace to get around now. But at the end of the day, what he did was still seen as heroic. So much so that Flash Thompson, who earlier in the issue was bullying Peter and even threatened to kick his ass, now looks at Peter and thinks, you know what? You're a cool kid, Peter. I want to keep getting to know you. And as a result, he starts bringing Peter in, and Flash and his friends start getting to know Peter. They begin getting to like him. And while they don't end up going for all the stuff that Peter likes to do, like going to science expos, they continue bringing him along to do all the things they do without belittling him. They include him. They treat him as an equal. And even when Flash tries to take advantage of Peter being his friend by saying, "Hey, can I cheat off your test?" Peter just immediately just shoots that down and says, "I'll tell you what, I'll tutor you." And Flash, while not happy with it, accepts. And we see later in the issue that friendship their friendship continued growing. Flash and Peter still happily hang out when Peter's tutoring him. And I love that it was Flash that had to bring Peter down to reality as he was fanboying over Silk, because immediately he's like, "Come on, you go." And when Peter says maybe he could do a fan club for her, it was Flash that said, "Come on, Peter, you're smarter than that. You can do better than a fan club." I love that, and I love that that moment. And again, it all went back to the night when the robber broke into the Parker household. As from that one night, Peter was able to not only save the life of someone close to him, but it helped him grow stronger. Not like physically he got weak. Physically he was still hurt. Like I said, he walks with a limp, but spiritually, emotionally, he grew. People saw what he did, saw what he lost essentially, and they said, "Peter, you're a good person. We want to get to know you." And as a result, Peter's life does get better. And when he sees Silk in this, result, when he sees Silk, he admires her. He thinks that she's amazing, and when he sees her doing all these amazing things, it kind of inspires him too. Especially since with no Spider-Man around, Silk becomes a target of J. Jonah Jameson's ire, and so feeling sympathy for her, he decides she needs support, she needs help, and so while Peter isn't the one fighting on the front lines, he's still helping out. He's still doing good in the world. He's helping Silk by giving her gadgets that she can use to fight the bad guys. And as a result, essentially, Peter's not been taken out of the fight. His role's just been shifted. He's no longer the amazing Spider-Man flipping through New York and kicking ass. He's Peter Parker, and he's helping out in his own way. And again, what I love is that what makes this story appealing to me is that it's not like doom and gloom. Again, like I mentioned before, unlike other alternate timelines where the absence of the hero results in everything kind of going to hell, in this new timeline, things are actually a lot better for Peter. Yes, he now has to walk with a limp for the rest of his life, but he ends up making a lot of new friends. He ends up becoming friends with all the popular kids in school as Flash becomes his in. He and Flash become really good friends. He dates Liz Allen, and they end up forming a genuinely strong relationship. He ends up getting a job at Oscorp, and on the superhero front, all of that's taken care of. As without Spider-Man there, Cindy decided to step up and become the premier spider hero of this world, and ultimately, while Peter's not the one shooting the webs out of his wrists anymore, he still wants to help, and so he provides Silk with all of the necessary gadgets she can, which again, like I said, doesn't take him out of the fight, it just changes his role, and thus ensures that while this world may not have a Spider-Man anymore, there's still good. The world is still doing well. Peter was still able to do good, and as a result, in this timeline, you can assume that all of the things that Spider-Man would have done to save lives and kick ass were done by Silk. So yes, things are a lot better. Though that also implies that there was a superior Silk arc at some point, and I don't want to think about Otto's mind and Cindy's body, so I'm gonna pretend that didn't happen and move on. My point is this, though: the whole timeline, I think, is really unique and interesting, as unlike other alternate timelines where the hero is taken away, we actually see what's beneficial about this new reality. We see a Peter Parker who's much better off in this timeline, as he's now got friends, he's got promising prospects for the future, and his Uncle Ben and Aunt May are still alive, and to make things better, he doesn't have to worry about the people he saved because someone else is doing the job for him, and doing it very well, and it's someone who in the original timeline he knew and was close to. So the fact that as a result, it ensures that despite Peter's changed role, things are still going well. This world is safe, and while Peter may not be Spider-Man, he's still a hero, albeit in his own way. And I like that. I very much like that. It's different enough from the main timeline, but similar enough. It's similar enough to the main timeline, but different enough in its own ways that it actually still catches your interest, and it is kind of uplifting to see that despite Peter not becoming Spider-Man, he's still doing his own thing. He's still helping out when possible. He's still being a good person, and socially he's doing a lot better for himself. Hell, like I said, he gets a job at Oscorp, and apparently he's a favorite by Norman. Mind you, I have absolutely no idea if in this new timeline Norman became the Green Goblin or not, but hey, let's pretend he didn't and move on. So, whatever. But bottom line, it is a very interesting and unique take on the whole alternate timeline thing, as again, the world is doing fine, someone else is doing Spider-Man's job, and Peter's actually doing well for himself while still kind of sort of staying in the fight. It's really cool, it's really nice, very sweet, and by the end, it's actually pretty uplifting to see how far Peter came despite his lack of spider powers, and as a result, I kind of like it. It's a very interesting story, though it also kind of makes everything a little bit more tragic because the thing is, status quo is God in comics, and Spider-Man is one of Marvel's most popular characters. So they're not just gonna axe him just for the sake of giving Peter a happy life. No. If anything, the fact that he's got a happier life now is more than enough reason for them to make him suffer. So, whatever. My point is this: at the end of the day, I do find that this issue is a very interesting one. I like seeing this. Oh, I like seeing Peter's new life in this new reality. I like seeing how far. I like seeing how things are improved in some ways, and while the same and showing that despite Peter's absence as the web slinger, at the end of the day, he's still He's still involved in fighting crime, and the one that is doing the job is doing it well. Meaning that while Spider-Man may be absent, isn't while Spider-Man may be absent, there's someone else still doing his job for him, so there's no worries about things going bad. And at the end of the day, it's a legitimately unique and interesting issue that ultimately kind of makes you smile and kind of keeps things uplifting, while still having a tinge of tragedy, since at the end we're still reminded, hey, Into the Spider-Verse is going on, so we got to worry about that. Plus, on top of the fact that we know that at some point all of this is going to get undone and Peter's going to go back to being Spider-Man. So yeah, I hope Peter enjoyed the life right now, because it's gonna hurt when it's all taken away. But at the end of the day, it's overall still a good issue with a lot of heart, some great character stuff, a very interesting, unique, and alternate take on the early days of Spider-Man, and on the whole, is very enjoyable. Quite honestly, I'm gonna say this: if you don't want to read Into the Spider-Verse but do still want to pick up a Spider-Man comic, I would at least recommend picking up issue 5, because yeah, it's still a part of the greater Spider-Verse whole, but as a standalone story, it's enjoyable. So, yeah, I think that's all. So, yeah, overall, good issue and a great story. Overall, good issue, great alternate take, and I liked it. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Thursday as we go back to End of the Spider-Verse and see exactly what the good Mr. Parker is able to do with this strand of the Web of Life and Destiny. So, till then, I hope you have a good Tuesday evening, and take care.